Hello and welcome to the Generation Logistics podcast. In this episode, we're talking about the importance of sustainability and ethics. My name is Hope Ellen, and with me today, I'm joined by some wonderful guests. Let's start by introducing ourselves and a little bit about our role, starting with you.
I'm Shantel, and I currently work as a technology change manager in Asda.
I'm Tom, I'm on the graduate management scheme at Hoyer, and I'm currently in the project management role.
And last but not least,
Yep, I'm Luke, and I'm the HSEQ director for Wincanton.
what does that mean, Luke, that last bit there?
So that's health and safety, environment and quality.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll hear more about that later on in the episode. But I want to start by hearing from you all personally why you feel sustainability is an important factor within your sector. Let's start with you, Shantel.
I think sustainability is important because obviously supply chain and logistics is at the forefront of everything that we do, from the cars that we drive. I think it's important when understanding sustainability within the sector, it's important to look at the definition of logistics. So obviously logistics is, how we get the raw materials from point of origin to the point of consumption where it's a final product. So obviously if you think about everything that we have around us, we have products around us that constantly need to be transported. So that essentially means trucks are going out every day from, different depots. Ships are, being shipped from the ports. Flights are obviously coming from China or America here to the UK. So it's important that with all these operations that we have on a day-to-day basis, we're limiting the amount of fuel consumption that we have or any CO2 emissions we're producing, because obviously the logistics sector is...
There are so many moving parts,
yes,
isn't there?
There are so many moving parts to it. So I'd say that's why it's important. We're constantly on the go, we're constantly delivering things, we're constantly making things. So it's important that whilst we're doing all these things and keeping the lights on, we're essentially not doing a lot of damage to the planet. And I think given the scale of the industry as well, it's important to make sure that we're keeping the damage to a limit.
Thank you, Shantel. And Luke, for you personally, why do you feel like sustainability is so important for the sector?
I think it's really important because it's a huge challenge. The supply chain represents one of the largest footprints in the UK, so it's a huge opportunity to make change, positive change.
And Tom, anything to add to those two answers there?
I think Luke and Chantel summed that up pretty well. I think sustainability is important, especially within logistics, because it's at the forefront of everything we do. I think for me, choosing a company, I obviously was looking for that sustainability aspect of it. And I think even with a company such as Hoyer, who people might have the viewpoint that they just transport chemicals and dangerous products that can impact the environment, they still do a lot in terms of their operation and optimising their operation to reduce emissions by different means. Those means might include alternative drivetrains or optimising their network more efficiently. But that was really important for me, and it was really encouraging for me to see that a company such as Hoyer, who transport these dangerous chemicals, still takes sustainability and makes it a priority in their agenda.
I suppose for some people that would be quite surprising to hear, but actually, because of the substance being transported, I imagine there are so many strict rules and regulations in place. Is that the case?
Yeah, so I think for hazardous materials and dangerous chemicals, there's still quite a big restriction on drivetrains, for example. So we can't use a great deal of electronic vehicles and electronic drivetrains. Hoyer are implementing quite a lot of investment into new hydrogen fuels and different types of biofuels. So it's all about how we kind of move with the times and move with the regulations. I think, we're never going to get to a point where we're transporting petrols, perhaps on fully electric vehicles. That might be too dangerous, but I think there's definitely still help from the government and subsidies and regulations that we can abide by and move with the times in that sense.
Luke, we heard a lot of examples from Tom there about things that are being done. What's being done at the business you work at in order to encourage sustainability?
There's a whole range of things going on at the minute. So we started to report our carbon footprint around 15 years ago, but in the last 2 or 3 years, things have really started to accelerate. So if I was to try and simplify it, I think it's electrification. And I know in some cases you can't always do that, but you're starting to see it happen in most places, if not more or less everywhere.
And Shantel, you're at Asda. What things are being done there?
So just to name a few examples, so where I work in TU, it's a parcel service company. So at the moment, what we're doing is we're utilising Asda's own vehicles instead of owning our own fleet, and that's just an example of how we're piggybacking and optimising our solutions to ensure that we're not getting a large amount of trucks out there, for unnecessary reasons. So essentially, that's also working as a way of reducing carbon footprint and helping to achieve the sustainable goals that the company have set out.
When companies are trying to implement new policies, sometimes there can be pushback from people. Have you experienced that at your place of work, Shantel?
Not as of yet, no. I think all the initiatives that Asda have put in place to tackle sustainability are being met with happiness, and they're being welcomed as they should be. But I think they're supporting the community essentially. So there's nothing that's received a pushback as of yet anyway.
So Tom, you mentioned about kind of renewable resources with the electric vehicles and things. Can you tell us some more about that?
I think we've already mentioned that there's a lot of electrification going on around the industry, perhaps not at my place of work, but it's really good to see companies like DHL and Wincanton investing in electric vehicles and investing in a lot of them. Obviously, there's different technologies that we can invest in. I think one of the really encouraging, and I think kind of leading technology that I saw, I've seen throughout my professional career, would have been while I was at Arla. So in the inbound section of Arla from farm to distribution centre, their trucks are actually powered by poo, if you pardon the pun.
Oh, okay.
So they run off cow's methane and obviously produce that biofuel to go into the engines of the tractor units, which is I think a really cool initiative, and it helps towards reducing emissions in a bit of a different way, and gives a bit of a slogan and a bit of a fun twist on sustainability.
So we just heard from Tom there that there are innovative creations using poo, for example, to help run renewable energy. Here at this building we're currently in, there is actually a thing called Ideas Factory. Now that makes me think that within logistics there is room to be creative, to think outside of the box. Is that the case, Luke?
Yeah, certainly in Wincanton, we're in our W² Innovation Centre, and environmental sustainability is one of the core elements of innovation and technology we're always looking for. So you'll see it around this room, but you'll also feel it out in the operations as well. We certainly encourage that sort of mindset.
And is it usually the bigger businesses that kind of lead the way and smaller firms follow?
I mean, we work very closely with our partners, but yeah, it can be a little bit reliant upon bids. We're certainly looking at them now when it comes to ZERF, or zero emission freight demo. So yeah, I can kind of see that a little bit, but it will require those companies to sort of invest in the technology to make it become available. I mean, the classic one is hydrogen, because you can't always get hold of green hydrogen, but unless the larger companies invest in it early, it won't become available for everyone else.
Now, the reason I ask that is because there might be people listening to this who are maybe young people, and they usually are even more passionate about sustainability and ethics than maybe older generations. So I wondered if they should be looking at the bigger companies who are leading that change.
I think when it comes to choosing whether it's a big company or a small company, it doesn't really matter, because there's quotas and there's legislation and government processes that are being put in place. So I think everyone at the moment has to follow those rules that have been set out. So it doesn't matter whether it's a small company that you decide to go work at or it's a big company. Essentially, we're all doing the same things. We're recycling paper. We're not using plastic. We have specific bins for specific materials. So I'd say that both are equally as good, really.
I think I'd probably echo that point from Shantel as well. I think, like we said before, it's probably more about the company values and what that company stands for, regardless really of the size of the company. it doesn't really matter. It just matters who works, I suppose, with the company, and if they have the same values as the company does, and if they can push that sustainability agenda within.
Anything else to add to that, Luke?
I'd say the first thing you should do is look for the company's website, but also another good place to look is the annual report. And in there, look for a company that's being clear, honest and transparent with everything they're talking about in the ESG or sustainability section.
Where can you go to find out a company's values before you're there, though, Tom?
I suppose if you don't work for the company, you could probably have a bit of a research online and kind of get ingrained in them that way. I think when people apply for new jobs, perhaps they go on a company's website and kind of research the values and see if that company's for them. I think that might be what we all did here before we applied for the company, just to see if it was the right fit. And I think with them and with most companies nowadays, no matter what the size is, there's quite a big push on sustainability in their agenda and in their company values.
Shantel, you mentioned that all businesses, large and small, have got these policies they have to follow. Is there any new policies coming in that you know about?
I don't know of any new policies at the moment that I know that are coming about, but I do know that everyone's currently on a journey of trying to reduce their CO2 emissions, either by 2040 or 2050. So that's what everyone's currently working on, and just reducing the digital footprint. And I guess that makes sense because a lot of the logistics industry is about transportation, getting the goods from point A to B, and that also adds to the footfall. So I guess that's the main focus at the moment, and then everything else will follow. And then essentially, I'd say to add on to that, maybe plastic reduction. So everyone's looking at alternative ways of using plastic. So, for example, in Asda, instead of using wooden pallets, which obviously will break down as time goes by, we're looking at using plastic chips because they're obviously reusable and they're more durable and can be used over and over again. So, yeah, that's definitely what I would say at the moment.
Tom, earlier on in the episode, you mentioned government subsidies. Can you tell us more about that, what that means?
So a government subsidy is obviously a grant, so to speak, put in place by the government to kind of support in investment, and in investment in this case of renewable energy sources. Haven't got any examples perhaps relatable to here in the UK for those subsidies, but I know in Germany and in Europe there's a lot of additional investment for companies who want to invest in sustainable tractor units and sustainably powered tractor units. I know over in Germany there's, I think, the government pledged to cover about 80% of the capex if a company wanted to invest into these renewable energy and drivetrain. So I think perhaps Luke might have a bit more information perhaps about the UK, but across the globe, and I think it's important that we think globally and not just locally. There's a lot going on and a lot of investment and help from the government.
Excuse my naivety, but what on earth is a drivetrain?
A drivetrain is just like a different type of power unit for the tractor unit. So perhaps, I don't know, it's powered by electric or it's powered by hydrogen, it's powered by petrol, diesel. So, yeah.
Okay. And in terms of the government subsidies or initiatives, how important is that for the sector to have that kind of encouragement?
So I think it's vital, really. Without government support and help, then we'd, I suppose, as a sector, then we'd perhaps, maybe struggle's the wrong word, but it's definitely a helping hand, and it shows other sectors that if they kind of take that forefront in sustainability, then the help will be given as well. It's not just a one-way stream of communication and help. It's a two-way thing with these new subsidies and regulations.
Luke, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think most businesses will want to do the right thing, and as soon as you make it financially sustainable, the floodgates open up. So yeah, the more investment you get, the more support you get from government, the faster that will happen.
Because you work in an industry that is so dependent on fuels, has there been a challenge when it's come to implementing more friendly practices?
Definitely. You can't operate in the way you've always operated in, so you have to change or rethink the model. So an example of that is electric vehicles. So, you won't necessarily be able to carry the same loads that you would across the same distances as before. So where we have used electric vehicles, it's been in a city centre.
Luke, your sector is very dependent on fuels, it always has been. So now that there's more initiatives to make them friendlier practices, how much of a challenge has that been?
So in terms of the challenge, we've had to rethink how we operate, take another look at the model. And a classic example of that is electrification with vehicles. So where we've implemented it in IKEA, we've done more local delivery, city centre delivery, and the scheduling and the planning has also sort of covered the charging locations as well, how far the vehicles can go, the weights they can carry. So it's all been factored into that operation.
Has that opened up more job opportunities if you're now having to do more planning and structuring?
I think so, yeah. And it's slightly different skill sets. You know, I remember scheduling 10, 15, maybe longer years ago, and it will be in a very manual process. But now a lot of it, you know, is kind of automated, but you'll need people who can help that automation and the software solutions for that too.
I think looping back to the challenges, obviously when we think about, for example, the example that you used, Luke, was electrification. Just everyday charging points, there's a struggle to sometimes get that infrastructure built in a time frame that's feasible. And I think obviously we're still struggling now. Not everywhere has charging ports for enough vehicles, and that problem still exists. So I think another challenge that I would probably put out there is, do we have the infrastructure, and is that infrastructure ready for us as logistics providers?
And there's another challenge or opportunity as well. So people always want something yesterday, don't they? So if the demand or the people who want the products, the services can be a little bit more flexible about it, then that whole solution can be more sustainable as well.
Shantel, tell me about something that's been achieved at your place of work in regards to sustainability that you have thought, that is brilliant.
So currently in Asda, in most Asda stores, you find that there's refillable stations for some of your groceries. I think that's an amazing idea. So you can find cereal, you can find cocoa beans for coffee, for example. And the initiative is essentially to encourage customers to buy the refillables instead of buying the packaged goods, which obviously come with plastic and cardboard. So that's been working, and the communities do love that as well, because it works out cheaper, and then it's obviously helping the environment.
That is really good, because as individuals sometimes from the community, you want to do your bit, but you don't always feel that the infrastructure is there. So That's fantastic. Tom, tell me about something that your company's done that's really impressed you.
I think a lot of focus, and probably rightly so, is on the tractor units and electrification, as we spoke about, but there's also different types of small wins in regards to sustainability. I think network optimization is a big one, so we've managed to reduce our kilometres travelled by about 27%, I think, and optimise our network by that amount. I think as well, the energy we use, I know from speaking to some contacts at Hoyer in our head office at Hamburg, we kind of produce 30% of our energy there through the solar powers and through solar panels, and through green electricity. So it's good to see that it's not just on the road we're focusing on, but also a bit more behind closed doors and in regards to transport planning and scheduling.
And Luke, finally, what's something that's impressed you?
Last week we had our sustainability week for Wincanton, and we knew we were going to get lots of engagement, but I was in a very nice way overwhelmed with the amount of videos, feedback we received, and it was lovely to see people put a video in of how proud they were about a compost heap or a bee station, or I think they called it Buckingham Palace. One of the lovely things I did was put a video out there with me and my son where he was talking about his wormery, and that was to sort of inspire future generations. But you know, I think in the first couple of days we had 20, 30 videos coming in from the business, and it was just great to see.
It sounds as though at your place of work that there is things being done to encourage individuals outside of work. Is that the case?
Definitely, yeah. We have over 20,000 people at Wincanton, and your colleagues are your greatest asset. So if you can work with them, embrace them, find those people who are passionate about it as well, it's going to go a long way.
Tom, tell me something that you would like to see the industry do more of.
When we think about sustainability, we probably think about cutting emissions and obviously, like we mentioned, network optimization and things like that. But there's also different parts of sustainability. So perhaps more social, the social impacts of sustainability. I know Shantel mentioned about some of the social impacts that she's seen at Asda. I think in the places where I've worked, maybe there hasn't been as much focus on that, but I think it's quite an easy win. Perhaps is the right way to frame it. So I think for me, a lot more focus on the social impacts of sustainability.
Shantel, anything to add?
Yeah, I think one thing I'd like to see within, the industry is more of like collaborative working, just, so companies helping each other to meet the sustainability and the, CO2 emissions goal. So essentially that can, be done by, so for example, if you have a truck from, Asda leaving, going to Basingstoke, they also want to send a truck from Tesco, leave from the same area or the same nearby depot. Essentially, why don't the companies work together, say, let's share one truck and optimize the full trunk and then send one vehicle out to the respective depots and then obviously split the cost, how they would, they'd work it out essentially between them two. And that's essentially reducing fuel, transportation costs, the CO2 emissions that are produced. So I think, more collaborative working within the industry, that's one thing that would help sustainability.
Is that your idea?
Yeah.
It's a very good one.
Thank you.
And Luke, do you feel as though enough money is being invested in sustainability in the sector?
Ooh, yeah, that's a tough one.
It's a loaded question, but I think you can give me an answer.
No, because you always want to see more, but it's got to be financially sustainable. So it's very difficult to weigh it up, but I would like to see more invested so that those products, services can become sustainable. So the hydrogen one, I think it's 2027 or between 2027 and 2030 before that may become financially sustainable. So it's going to need a lot of investment to get to that point. And I think I looked at a vehicle that was £2.5 million. That's a lot of money for businesses, any business really. And you'd hope that they could get down to the hundreds of thousands instead.
So Luke, you mentioned about financial stability, but customer satisfaction comes into it, particularly when we're talking about the ethical side of things. So how much do customers or clients impact that?
A good example for that is carbon offsetting. And yes, it's the last thing you do, but we work very closely with our customers in terms of the ethics of that. So if you were to purely look at it financially, you could buy woodland in China or America very easily at a very low cost. However, it's not that much of an ethical decision. I'd much rather buy it in the UK or even better in a developing country. So we'll work with our customers to highlight the decisions and which ones would be the best to make.
And Tom, adding on to that, are customers always forthcoming? And if they're not, how do you encourage them to prioritise ethics and sustainability?
It's part of a partnership, really. I think both companies have to, and I assume when both companies engage with a contract with each other, they kind of look at each other's core values and see, is this the right company for us to be partnering with? I think that's the same with a customer transaction. And I think from looking at Hoyer's core values and from looking at Arla's previous core values before, I think any customer that wants to cooperate with us in that aspect would also have sustainability on the forefront. I think perhaps sometimes it might take some convincing. There's obviously the financial aspect that goes with it and the financial viability, but I think, look, as we mentioned before, core values are at the heart of everything we do, and as a customer, they should see that and see that we'd be an effective partner in pushing sustainability forward.
And Shantel, you mentioned those filling stations at Asda. Has customers' reaction to those been positive?
Yes, customers' reactions to that have been positive. We've seen on social media customers responding in a positive way and obviously reviewing that this is, useful, and they found that essentially is cheaper than buying a product off the shelf, already packaged anyway.
And how does it feel to know that the company that you work for are kind of being a bit of a catalyst, because other businesses might see that on social media and then follow your kind of way?
I think one thing is it makes me proud because, you can actively say that that's the company that I work for. So even just watching some of the initiatives that they're pulling off, for example, utilising Asda's fleet within TU. So just being able to have our own parcel solution company, but also utilising the current fleet that we have, that's something that's also impressive. So it makes me happy to know that, we're one of the first few to do something as big as this. So, yeah.
All of these policies that are coming in and are being positively received from the sounds of it, how will that impact the future workforce, Luke?
One of the things I've seen from my side, so I look after operational training, is that a few years ago, you would have far more sustainability related roles than there were people to do them. Now it's the complete opposite. So luckily we spotted that early on and we've set up a sustainability training centre, training academy. So we recognise that we're going to need a lot more sustainability professionals to work in supply chain. So we partnered with IEMA, the Institute of Environmental Management Association, to have the only dedicated sustainability training centre in supply chain, certainly in the UK that I know of. So we've been doing that for 2 to 3 years, and the demand for that is unprecedented. And yeah, there's a lot of people that need to be upskilled, and you could be really passionate in the subject, but a lot of the time people need to be educated to be able to apply it.
It's a really exciting time because people listening to this now, their future job role might not even exist yet.
Yeah.
So what would you say to those people when studying? What should they go for? Because it's an unknown.
I'll tell you what I did. So my background is in education and as a safety professional, and I wanted the E in my title in the future, and thank God I've got it now. But I think it was around 5 years ago, I did a number of qualifications within sustainability to keep that door open. And 5-6 years ago, I managed to get a role as HSEQ training manager. So for me, it worked perfectly, but I would recommend it to anyone. It's a bit like a safety qualification. You can't lose having something like that in your belt.
And I suppose even if you don't want to do that particular route, researching and staying on top of what's being done with sustainability or ethical working and practices, because it's evolving all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll touch every part of all roles within supply chain, really. And, there isn't just the environmental side on it. You touched about it earlier. There's 19 global goals. So, yeah, it's a great thing to invest your time in. Can
we hear some of those 19 global goals?
Well, I can't reel them off, but what I would say about the global goals is we try to focus on them, the ones that you can have a real impact on. So I won't share them just now, but out of the 19 global goals, we sat there, looked at them and thought, actually, 7 of these we can have a really big impact, and rather than just spreading ourselves everywhere, we're focusing on the ones we can make change.
And Tom, you mentioned earlier on about Germany with Hoyer. So how does that work when you're kind of working across different countries?
I think it's good. I think we spoke, and Shantel spoke about knowledge sharing and cross-platform sharing. There's definitely examples of things and initiatives we've done over in Germany that can be transferred over to the UK. I think for me, the big eye-opener in cross-functional work was when I was at Arla. There was a lot of work in Scandinavia, Norway, Denmark and Sweden especially, where sustainability is, to put it lightly, miles ahead in comparison to the rest of us, and a lot of sharing of knowledge in that way about how we operate and how we operate with electric vehicles and how we optimise routes and things like that. So I think just to get that example of best practice and to get those examples in is key. I suppose that goes for any industry, really.
Shantel, why is keeping a high ethical standard important within the sector?
I'd say it's important because it also ensures that there's a certain aspect of quality in everything that we do. For example, from like sourcing, the quality of products that are produced and, the end goal, I'd say that's the main reason why it's important, because essentially it leads to customer satisfaction as well. Customers know that they're getting the best of the best, essentially.
Luke, anything to add to that, or Tom?
Ethically, it's the right decision isn't always the easiest one, but I don't know how much I can add to that.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's probably not the most cost efficient one either, but there's obviously standards and ethical standards that need to be met as well. I think probably every company has a code of conduct which has their ethical standards in, and it's probably about how we link that back to core values and how we can link that back in.
To end the episode today, I want to hear from each of you. If someone's listening to this and they really care about working for a sustainable, ethical business, why should they choose to work within your sector? Luke?
I think when it comes to supply chain, it presents the biggest opportunity. It's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, footprint in the UK. So if you want to make real change, have an impact, that's the best place to start.
Tom?
Yeah, I think Luke probably stole my answer.
Sorry.
It's all right. It's a huge sector, but I think obviously we mentioned there's huge gains to be made. There's obviously tangible gains to be made that we can see out on the roads through different drivetrains, different tractor units. But I think for people wanting to get into supply chain and sustainability, there's a clear pathway now with programs such as Novus and Generation Logistics. People can get a real understanding while they're at university or while they're at work about what they want to do, and I think the industry of logistics and supply chain really supports that.
I just want to probe quickly as to what Novus is.
It's like a scheme at university, so they set up different courses around the country, so business and supply chain or logistics and supply chain, and it's really tailored towards what you want to do. There's modules around sustainability, modules around transport planning, and it just kind of narrows you down into what you want to do, and then you can kind of project that into your professional career, which is great.
Fantastic. And Shantel, what advice would you give to someone?
Join the sector. It's obviously always changing. Things are getting better day by day, even with the sustainability aspect, due to the agility and due to how agile the industry is. New ways of working are always coming in. So if you're passionate about sustainability, just know that a different way of doing something might be introduced next year, and it will meet the ethical standards that have been set out or exceed it, in fact. So I'd say we're definitely always adapting to what the government requires us to do in regards to sustainability and ethics.
I think there's always room for new ideas as well. It's an industry that allows us to have a bit of a voice and a bit of an opinion, whether that be with colleagues at perhaps our level or senior management level. Everyone's looking for new innovative ideas, and they're always supported in whichever organisation I've been in.
Well, it definitely sounds like an interesting time to join the sector. Shantel, Luke and Tom, thank you very much for sharing your insights. And thank you to you for joining us for this episode. Make sure you stick around for more insights coming soon.